Okay, our next speaker on the Fireside Chat will be Amber. I know you have a couple of questions, Amber, so please go ahead.
All right, I guess I'll ask my question about fear first. I know you probably talked about it already, but every time I hear you speak about fear, it helps me. And this is, I'm asking the question because of my own experiences. Just what do we do when we feel overwhelmed by the fear that we find and, self-limiting beliefs and even experiences that seem to solidify these root fears? I do see my own family, my immediate family that has these same root fears and how they manifest in their life, which in first my own, and just thinking it seems to strengthen it somehow, that it's all like netted together. And in dreams and in simulations, it's, say there's the root fear of feeling inadequate. There's also just this tinge, it's like they're so closely related, of fear of the unknown, fear of death, fear of vulnerability, that they're all kind of wrapped around each other. So I guess what's your advice when we feel overwhelmed? And it's also unearthed some attitudes that I would rather not admit that I have, like, oh no, I don't think I can do this. Those sorts of, things that are triggered by the panic of how it can be. And, my own resistance in the non-physical is so apparent and so strong that it's startling. So what do we do when we run into that?
Well, first thing to do, Amber, is to just stop thinking about it. If you think too much, same thing I said to Vanessa, if you think too much about it, you'll just get twisted around the axle and you won't, you'll just get frustrated because you won't be able to come to any kind of a conclusion of, what you ought to do about it. You'll be much better to feel your way through it than to think your way through it. So when you feel these fears, the fear of being inadequate is a big one. Yes, that's a root fear. It's everywhere. So when Vanessa says, well, maybe I can't do this, maybe I shouldn't do it because I'd have to, be a public speaker and, that would be a problem. Or maybe it's just my ego that wants me to do this and it's not really a good thing. All of those are the fear of being inadequate, the fear of not doing it right, the fear of being wrong, the fear of failure, and they're all connected. You're right. All these fears are connected with each other. They're all part of the same thing. Once you have some basic fears, those fears, grow and spread and combine with each other to make new fears, and fear begets fear. So the thing to do is just pick one. Pick one. Don't pick the hardest one. Pick something that's easy, or something that you have that's kind of annoying, but like with Vanessa, it would be like the fear of public speaking. You see, that's not a root fear like the fear of being inadequate, but it's a smaller fear, and just work on that until you get rid of it, because the hardest one to get rid of is the first one. After that, the process gets easier and faster. So if you feel all this fear, and the fact that you do feel a lot of fear means that you're progressing, you are growing, because most people, if you tell them, well, you're generally, all your choices are motivated by fear, ego, and belief, they won't believe that. They'll say, no, not me. I maybe have a little fear here and there, but I really don't have very many. And they certainly don't make my choices for me. But then if they grow up, they realize that that's not the case. You see, you've grown up to the point that you realize there's fear, right up to your eyebrows. All sorts of fears, big ones, little ones, root ones, all sorts of little fears about all sorts of things. And that's what becomes overwhelming. It's like, oh, where am I going to start? What am I going to do with all of this fear? Well, the first thing is just pick one and try to get rid of it. Not such a big one. Pick a little one and just get over it. Something that makes you angry, something that upsets you. Something that you do when you interact with your mother or your father or your spouse or your children, they're your big teachers, or those people that are close to you. Something that you interact, and whenever you interact, whenever this subject comes up, whenever this thing happens, you get upset. Well, deal with that. Whenever your children fail to do their homework, or whenever your spouse leaves these underwear and socks laying on the floor for you to pick up, or whatever else that kind of gets you going, then just say, I'm going to deal with that. I'm not going to let that bother me. I'm going to deal with it in a positive way, not allowing myself to get aggravated or upset or annoyed over it. I'm just going to accept it, and I'll see if I can, I'll try to maybe tell the person how I feel about it. But if that doesn't change things, then I'll just accept it is the way they are. And I'll find some more positive way to deal with it other than getting upset. When I say deal with it, it doesn't mean let it go. It still may be a problem you need to deal with, but deal with it without getting upset, without getting annoyed, without getting angry. See, deal with it without the negativity. That's really the key. It's not that you don't have to deal with the problem or just let the problem go. It's deal with the problem without any negative feelings, without feeling that, you're abused, or, it's not my role to do this, or somebody else ought to do that, or I don't get the credit that I ought to get for the things that I do. All that's negative stuff. So just pick one of those. I'm sure you'll find one and get over it. And it may take you a while, but it'll be the hardest one is the first one. That's why I say just pick an easy one, and then start working on others. And pretty soon you'll be getting rid of them easily. Instead of taking you 6 months or a year to get over them, you're getting rid of them, in a couple of weeks. And then you can finally get down to those root fears of where's all this stuff coming from anyway? It's that fear of, that's that inadequacy. It's the being insecure. It's that sort of thing. Being unappreciated, being unlovable, not being all the things that you could be, not being a good enough mother or a good enough wife or a good enough school teacher or whatever it is you do in your life or whatever relationships you have. All of that will go away. And guess what? When it does, you'll be the happiest, smiley person, and everybody will just enjoy being around you because you'll be so positive, and everybody will come to you with their problems because you won't ever be judgmental and tell them what to do. You'll just give them advice that's not direction. So that's what you do. You just start someplace and start working on it. As long as you just stay in the I'm thinking about it mode, and I'm seeing all these things, but I really don't know what to do because they're all there. And when I get that button pushed, I always get upset. Well, pick that button and say, I'm going to work on that button and make it go away. So when that person says that to me, it'll just be okay. I'll deal with it positively.
Thank you, Tom. And I know that the fear of inadequacy is one of the big ones. I did, reach out for help, and I had this simulation. I had a few simulations, and one was just kind of like, it almost seemed like practice, like watching the shadowy figure. This, it's very symbolic simulation that is deeply rooted in the collective consciousness. So it was like this mountaintop and the shadowy figure. And it was, feeling that writhing of the ego rise up within you and still staying still, which that was helpful. I mean, but I'm not, I need to do that and master that. I am kind of spinning, and I recognize that I'm in the same kind of like fear loops for decades now, it seems, and it's just very overwhelming. And then the second one was accepting the fear of inadequacy. And it wasn't like, because intellectually I can say, okay, I accept I have these fears, but it wasn't like that. It was like, yeah, I'm definitely going to be annihilated because I'm inadequate. And I moved forward. And the only reason I think that I was able to go through that was because I had help, and it was held there for me. And a couple times, I had a couple opportunities recently, and I just kind of skedaddled out of there so fast, like a cockroach when you turn on the lights. And I laughed at myself, but it's like, geez, that's pretty intense. So what you said is helpful, and I appreciate it. And I will think of what I can do. I think I have some opportunities in relationship that I can work on. So
yeah, once you start getting rid of a fear, that fear will push back. So you should expect that. When you say, well, I'm not going to let this upset me anymore, and you start to get rid of that fear will start to loom up. You'll start getting these feelings of not only before it was just annoying, but now it's somebody's abusing you, you see, and it gets bigger and uglier and blacker because the fear doesn't want to be let go of. So it tends to want to push back against you getting rid of it. So whatever you try to get rid of, expect it to try to make that fear as big and dark and black and ugly as possible so that you'll stop trying to get rid of it. You just have to persist on through that, and take a whole bunch of small victories will eventually end up to a big victory.
Okay. That sounds terrifying, but okay, Tom. It's like, I mean, I had one experience where I knew I made this decision. I'm an ethical vegan, and I made a decision based out of fear with a job opportunity. And it seemed like, and I could see myself doing it. I basically sabotaged myself for a dream that would have fit with somebody who's vegan, with an animal rights organization. I ended up working somewhere where I was sifting through, and I had no idea this was going to be a part of the job, paperwork that was from a slaughterhouse, and the stench was horrible. And I was like, how did I end up here? Well, you made a poor decision. So it kind of gets caricature-like in a way. So yeah, anyway, that's really helpful. And I always appreciate that you're willing to give us so much time and so much energy into our questions, because it is very helpful.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I do have another question about an experience that I had with my third eye, I guess. About 3 years ago, I had this lucid dream where my third eye was filling with light. And around that time, I started to put stones on my body, because my idea was that I was going to use this symbolic thing to uproot all my self-limiting beliefs and my fear and my ancestral patterns and things, which I started to feel pretty sick pretty quickly. These things that, it makes me dizzy. It makes me feel sick, these deeply rooted things. But anyway, so it was around that time. I'm not really sure what came first. But anyway, I had this experience where my third eye was filling with light. And then I began to feel pulsating and pressure that would, I'd get this image of shop class where they have the wood vise and you're clamping the wood together. It would just get so intense. And a lot, when I was at work, I worked in a metaphysical shop. It would be like, if I think, when people were directing energy at me, which would happen often, it would get that way, or certain parts of the shop or interacting with certain people. And I started to think, or doing divination, I started to think, okay, this is good, because when it wasn't so intense, this means that I'm maybe going into a different, I'm expanding my consciousness or something, and I really am trying. But then I started to think maybe this is fear, because it was uncomfortable. And I also considered maybe it was a medical condition and maybe I needed an MRI or something. But I had this guy come in who he did cement flooring for a living, but then he ended up telling me, nobody knows this, but I do this. I'm learning this certain kind of shamanism. And he started talking about the chakras and everything. And he looked at my head and my crown area, and he said, you have something going on. Have you been experiencing, dizziness, pressure, all this stuff? And I was super uncomfortable around the people that I worked with. So I lied through my teeth and I said, no, I'm not experiencing that stuff. But it kind of made me think, okay, maybe this is non-physical, to have that lucid dream where my third eye is filling with light, and then to be experiencing things and to have that experience with him coming in and asking me. Anyway, I could never really move the energy, and I don't feel that whatever was happening completed, because it's starting to come back a little bit, and I'm just wondering, what could it be? Is it fear? Is it sensitivity? How do I move the energy? What do I do when it happens? I mean, it happened, today, like I had picked up the MBT book and I got a little a pressure in my third eye. So I don't know. I just feel it now and again. I'm wondering what your advice is about that, because I feel like I didn't complete something that started.
Okay. I'll start out with the same way I did the last question, and that is stop thinking about it so much. The more you try to intellectualize it, the worse the problem is going to be. Work with your intuition more. Just let it be. Don't feel like there's something you have to do with it or any place you have to move it or anything else. It will go the way it goes. It will do its own thing, and that's okay. It's likely that what you're feeling there is a physical metaphor, if you will, that has to do with your own sense of growth, your own sense of doubt, your own pattern of becoming, and you create that pain, that pressure there, because that is a symbol, that is a metaphor for something, that has to do with your own growth and your own process. So that is probably the source of it. And the thing to do is don't think about it. That just makes it worse. The more you try to pin it down, the more you try to decide intellectually, what should I do with it? Should I move it up and get rid of it? Should I move it down through my body? Should I make this nice little trace down my spine in just the right way and then back up like the Kundalini? What should I do with this thing? All of that just creates more trouble. You don't have to do anything with it. Just be with it. Just be with it and let it do whatever it does. In other words, you can let your attention go there, but don't feel like there's anything you have to do in particular with it. Deal with it more from an intuitive level, not from an intellectual level. Don't think about it. Just be with it. Okay? Just be with it. And then if you just be with it, you'll probably feel some of the stuff that's going into creating it. You'll feel things. Ideas will come. Pictures will come. All sorts of things may come that will be useful to you. But as long as you try to think about it and figure out what you should do, you're probably missing the point of connecting with it at a being level rather than an intellectual level. So just let that be with it, become one with it. Be the force that's causing the pressure there, and see what it's thinking, what is it feeling, what is it doing. So instead of thinking of it as an outside thing that you have to somehow do the right thing with, think of it as a natural thing, or perhaps a metaphorical thing, and just let it unravel. Let it unravel and see what your intuition comes up with as it happens. But when it's going on, don't be thinking about, oh, look, that feeling I get. Oh, that's getting pretty intense. That feels like somebody's, punching in, my forehead, with a hammer. What if it gets worse? Then what am I going to do? This could be crippling. And you start thinking about it. Your fear comes into play about what it might be that's not good. Do I need an MRI? And your fear comes into it. Even the fear about, I don't want my coworkers to know that I have this. There's another fear, right, of what they might think or so on. So you just need to let all that fear go. Be with it. Let it go or do whatever it is, but be gently with it. Not trying to name it, not trying to figure it out, not trying to do much of anything with it other than let it work itself out. And it probably will. The reason I think that you keep getting it, or it comes back, or it gets intense to where it's hard to stand, is that you keep intellectualizing, worrying about it. Fears get connected to it. You're not sure. It's uncertain. You have some fear of uncertainty, and all of that stuff then starts to turn into almost like an obsession. It gets to where it's bothering you. And then it's going to be higher pressure and more uncertainty, and it just goes downhill. It starts to add to itself. So break that cycle, let it be, join with it, and just tell it, well, whatever you're about, just go ahead. Do it. Let me feel whatever it is you want to do. And instead of pushing at it or trying to think it through, just feel it through. I think that would be a good approach, and you'll probably find that it'll lighten up a whole lot, and it won't be so much pressure. The third eye is a metaphor anyway. It's not really a physical thing; it's a metaphorical thing. So your metaphor is beginning to cause you pain.
Yeah,
that means that you're too twisted up around it. that you're turning it into something painful, because the pain represents the fear, represents the problem, the uncertainty, all those things that are uncertain about it, that worry you. That's where the pain comes from. So if you just let it go, it will subside, and you may even learn a few things from it. Get some interesting pictures about causes and things you need to work on or whatever. Turn it into something positive. Not worry about it being something negative or that you're not doing it right. That's a problem. You are doing it right. Just the fact that you're doing it, that's right. And then we see the feedback you get, and then you learn from the feedback.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, I never knew how much I must have bought into the whole chakra metaphor, probably like as a teen or something, but it's kind of a helpful way to organize information. But I do overanalyze. And when we are using our intuition and this kind of goes back, I guess, to my first question, and things pop up, things that we need to work on or experiences we might have had, things like that. How do we, you look at, I guess, traditional therapy, I see a lot of people who soak in their issues, just kind of soak there. So what's the proper way to handle that? How do you get involved in those things that come up, or how? I'm just not quite sure.
Have an intent that you want to get rid of fear. You want to get rid of problems. Have an intent that you don't have to understand everything, that you can live gracefully with uncertainty. There's a lot of things that you don't have to understand or name or come up with a process to describe, that you can just exist with them. So have those intents that you're not going to, you're not going to get wrapped up around it. Just let it be however it is and be easy with it. Be gentle, be okay with it. Not, so don't be fearful of it in any way. Just let it be. And whatever it is, it is. It's okay. Don't struggle. Don't struggle with it, or struggle to know it, or struggle to name it. Struggle is the problem. Struggle is why it gets so intense, because you're struggling with it. You're fighting with it rather than just letting it be. So, it's your intention that you're going to absorb it, let it go, however it is, whatever metaphor works for you, and that's going to be good. However it works out, it's going to be good. Just let it do whatever it's going to do, and it's going to be good. Have that and get rid of it without any fear, and everything will start to work out for you. It'll get a lot easier.
Thank you, Tom.
Tom, we've got another question from Vancouver, from Gail.
Oh, I'm unmuted. Hi, everyone. Hi. Yeah, it's kind of related to the previous question. For many years, when I was meditating and doing a lot of meditation practice and doing a lot of yoga practice at the same time, this phenomena began occurring where my body would involuntarily shake every time I sat down to meditate. And it started with just a little bit in my head shaking, and then it became more of my body shaking. And, I tried to just observe it and let it be what it was and not get too attached to it. And it just seemed like the more I let go, the more intense it became. It doesn't happen quite as much these days, but I do notice it again from time to time. And, in yoga tradition, they would probably say, well, that's part of your prana body, unraveling, blocks and knots and purifying itself. My shamanic friends say it's, the presence of a non-physical being or a spirit or, some other energy connecting with mine. And, my friends who are more into science and physiology will just say it's some, glitch in your nervous system, perhaps, or, I don't know. But anyway, I would very much like to hear what your take is on that.
Those things that you got about it, it's maybe just a nerve, or it's a being, or it's part of your energy shaking out bugs or something. All of that, of course, is metaphorical. And the shaking, probably has to do with, you're relaxing, and you may have some, I don't know whether this is the case or not, but perhaps you can tell me whether this fits. You may have some underlying fear or not in consonance that you don't quite feel right about, the meditation. It's something that could be there's a little something there that doesn't quite feel right to you. Often, if you have that kind of a feeling, like you're trying to tell somebody a story, but you're not quite sure that the story really, is a real story or not, or whether it's the right thing. And the shaking is sometimes a body's way of telling you to be careful, back up. You're not really at ease with what it is you're doing, kind of thing. And that may be a thing that you have with meditation. You're not really completely at ease with what you're doing. So that's a possibility. Another possibility is that you're a really good meditator and you're immediately getting into a pulsation state upon the beginning of your meditation. And in a pulsation state, you just feel like you're elastic and you're vibrating. And it could be something as easy as that, in which case it's a good thing, not a bad thing. But in any case, just notice that it's there and then accept it and just go on. In other words, just let it be. Try to ignore it the best you can. If you give it attention, it'll tend to get stronger. If you take your attention away from it, it'll tend to get weaker. So just don't give it much attention. Note it's there. You can't deny it. If you deny it, it'll get stronger. You just have to say, yeah, it's there, but it is whatever it is, and it won't, we'll see. We'll just be uncertain about it. Who knows? But it'll just stay there and ignore it. That would be the first thing. And if it gets worse when you do that, then it's probably something that's fear-related. If it goes away when you do that, it probably isn't fear-related. So that would be one way you could tell whether it's fear-related or not. If it's a pulsation state starting early, then just, again, let it be. You don't have to analyze it or know anything about it. Just let it be however it is, and it'll probably just fade after a while in your meditation. But if not, you can give it something useful to do. Associate it. Make your own metaphor. Make a positive metaphor. Say, when my body shakes like that, I'm putting energy into getting rid of my fears. I'm healing, my sick mother-in-law, whatever. You can make an association that's a positive thing to do, and then you'll have that positive association with it, which will turn it. It'll kind of remake it into something else that's positive, which then eventually it'll go away. So that's another thing you can do. Just rename the metaphor to some other metaphor that's a positive thing that you'd like to do, and let that shaking represent that positive thing. And that then totally takes what was there, re-channels it into something else, and the original thing will probably just kind of slink off into the background, while the new positive thing kind of takes charge. So those are some of the things you can do with it. But the body, being a virtual body, just it reflects the consciousness in many ways. And some of these ways are physical. Sometimes they're pains. Sometimes people who are very fearful have a lot of fear that they're dealing with. They'll start to get, they'll feel like bugs are crawling under their skin. They'll feel like their hair is standing up on their head. They'll hear voices that tell them rude things. They'll just get all of this phenomena going on, and they tend to believe that it's something outside of them attacking them, but it really is their own consciousness. It's their own fear expressing itself in physical terms. And it's a problem because the more frightened they get of it, because they can't sleep, they can't work, the stuff is going on, it's distracting, it's annoying, the more they get wrapped up around it, the worse it gets. So it's one of those things that just, it gets worse and worse and worse. So the last thing you want to do with something like that is give it a lot of your attention or overthink it. You need to just let things like that be, and they'll tend to go away. So that would be a couple of suggestions, things to try and what to do with it. But don't come to a conclusion, there's something wrong. There's something here that's a problem. There's something negative going on. I shouldn't be shaking like that. If you define it as a problem, you'll probably turn it into one, whether it is or not. So don't define it as a problem. Just live with it. Let your intuition discover what it is, if it wants to avail itself to your intuition. Does that help any?
Yeah, it does. It definitely does. Thank you. I as you were speaking, I was getting a little more clarity around it and realizing that it probably is connected to some fear, because I naturally feel some fear when it comes up, because it's an involuntary sort of thing where my body it feels like my body's taking over and I don't have much conscious control over what's happening. And then when it gets really strong, there's a lot of movement. I feel like a rocket ship about to take off.
Yeah.
And that to get to that point requires a lot of surrender on my part. I found the more I let go, the more I just let it be, the stronger it becomes. And as you were talking, I was wondering if it can be related to, if it can be sort of my experience of what precedes an out-of-body experience, because I also have some fear around, letting go of my body and allowing something like that to happen. So perhaps there's a relationship there.
Yeah, I suspect when you say it gets stronger when you let it go, what you really are doing is it gets stronger when you stop trying to constrain it. You stop trying to force it to be some way, but you're not really letting it go. Your mind is still connected to it. You're still feeling it. You're still aware of it. You're still processing it. So you're not really letting it go. You just stop trying to bully it. You stop trying to make it stop.
Right.
But your mind's still connected to it. You're still feeling it. You're still very aware of it. And I think that even makes it worse, because you are still there. You don't like it. You're feeling it's a negative thing. And you let go trying to control it, but you haven't let go of it as far as it happening. You're still engaged. You're still engaged with it, and that's why it gets worse. It's the engaging with it that makes it worse. You have to disengage and let it be. Yes, that the pulsation state I was talking about is something that happens not necessarily just before you go out of body, but when you get in a good theta state, a good meditation state, you'll get the pulsations as well. So it doesn't necessarily mean that something awful is about to happen. So try to not give it your attention. And as well as not manipulate it or try to make it go away, just let it go and don't be afraid of it. It's a virtual body, and the consciousness can produce all kinds of strange physical things inside your body. So just let it go and figure it's not a big thing. It's not a problem. I'm not having a heart attack. It's not causing me any difficulty. It's just there. It's one of these odd things that happen sometimes, and have that kind of gentle attitude with it, and not feel fearful or not get wound up about it, or not just focus your attention on it, waiting for it to calm down, because that'll just make it worse. Try to focus your attention away from it. Start thinking about something else. That would help. Start thinking about sending energy to heal somebody who needs healing. Put your mind elsewhere, and just figure that is just something that's some thing that has to do with your consciousness, probably with fear. You're feeling that, and you just need to not get negative about it, and not get upset with it, and not give it any of your attention. Disengage and leave it alone, and it'll probably dissipate.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
Okay, Tom, we've got a question from Mike in Australia. Mike says, Grandma never spoke about spiritual practices or concepts. She never went to church or read any spiritual books. She never spoke about the afterlife. She didn't meditate or burn incense. She loved rock music, tattoos, smoking, and swearing. She was also the first one up every morning, feeding the entire family. She'd clean up after everyone every single day, listen intently to everyone who spoke to her, and hug everyone and love them all unconditionally. She never said a bad word about Trump or anyone else, especially those who had opposing political, spiritual, or religious views. She never tried to impress, had no enemies, and would help anyone and everyone with no expectations whatsoever. She drank alcohol and coffee, ate meat, and even smoked weed. She was always joyful and radiated love and kindness. Is this a form of spirituality? If it is, then why don't we recognize it as so? What exactly is spirituality then?
Yeah, well, it sounds like Grandma is quite a character. Yes, all of those things that she did that were good things, the helping people, all the hugs, all the being there to help, the services she provided, the love and caring she provided, all of that is being spiritual. That's a high quality of consciousness that does all that stuff. The fact that she smokes and drinks and swears and whatever else, those are all incidentals. Those aren't that important. That's just kind of a wrapper. She probably picked that wrapper up, probably saw it in a movie someplace and thought it was really cool, so she adopted it. That's not what's inside. What's inside is the way she acts, the way she interacts with people, that she's giving and caring and loving and that sort of thing. That's what's important. Yes, I'd say Grandma was a very spiritual lady, whether she never said anything about any of those topics and whether she swears and fusses and, does all that stuff and smokes weed and whatever. None of that is important. The important stuff is how she acts, how she interacts with other people. So, yeah, Grandma looks like a high quality of consciousness to me, despite all the rest of that stuff that maybe would upset other people. I don't find any of that really important. That's just style. That's not substance. What she does and the way she loves and cares, that's substance. So don't mix up style with substance. And matter of fact, her style actually seems pretty cool. She's evidently a very unusual grandma. I tell her, give her my best. Tell her to keep on going, Granny.
Okay, Tom, thank you. Nicholas has a question for you. A friend of mine watches all your YouTube videos and has a question. He's an English teacher at the basic level, and he had a dream where he was teaching one of my real-life students. And when I was checking the student's work, I saw the word indicative in the dream. He didn't know what it meant, and even when I woke up, he didn't know either, so he Googled it. And the dictionary said, having recurrent dreams is not necessarily indicative of any psychological problem. His question is, are his dreams trying to tell him something?
Well, it sounds like his dreams are trying to tell him to pay attention to his dreams. That would be the message, I think. So I would suggest that he start a dream log and start having an intention to remember his dreams and write them down, because it sounds like his dreams have something to say, and they yet don't have a good enough connection to start saying it. So little things like that happen are basically an invitation to get more. So yes, start a dream log, start writing them down, start intending to remember, and see what happens.
Okay, Nicholas has a couple of other questions, but they're short. Watching huge landscapes and stars makes us think bigger thoughts. My question is, does it exist, these triggers that can give us the same effect even if you're inside your house, at work, and places where the visually PMR are not as fascinating?
So do these triggers exist elsewhere?
It's obviously this is a translated. Do triggers give us the same effect if you're inside your house, at work, and places where visually PMR isn't as interesting?
Yeah,
is what I can get out of it.
Yeah. yes, you can get those same feelings. You go hike to the top of a mountain and get out and look, and it's all inspiring, to see the rugged countryside around and the snow-capped peaks and so on. And that can be a very spiritual moment in the sense that you feel kind of connected, a piece of nature, one with all the stuff that you see. And you can also develop that same feeling even when you're sitting in front of your computer at the office. All you have to do is close your eyes for a moment, bring back that, that scene, that feeling that you had, and that feeling should just come right back to you. You can experience it again. So there's no need to have to climb the mountain, every day to get that experience. Once you've climbed it once, you can have that experience as many times as you want. And it will still give you the same benefits, the same relaxation, the same feeling of being connected to everything that it did in the first time. You just have to go there in your mind and re-experience it. That re-experiencing will have all the benefits of the original.
Okay. Tom, Nicholas has another question. You have 1,000 choices to make every day. And particularly, I'm talking about the choices you have with interactions with other people. This is one of your quotes. Does that mean that when you're not talking with a single person in a day, you don't progress spiritually?
Not necessarily. Depends on what you're doing while you're not talking. Now, if you never talk to another human being, if you stay, like the ascetic monks sometimes did, they'd go get in a cave and stay there and not talk or interact with anybody for decades. If you do that, you can still grow yourself in some ways. There's some things that you can work on, but you're limited in your application of your spirituality by being limited in your interactions with people. So people are an important part of it because that's where the application of your spirituality is. That's where your buttons get pushed. That's where you have to, walk the talk rather than just talk the talk. So interacting with people is significant and it is important, but that doesn't mean that you can't make any spiritual gains when you're isolated. You can, but you need both, actually. You need some time alone to process things and do some inner reflection and explore inner space. That takes some time, and that's done best alone. But also you need people to interact with, because that brings out another whole set of choices that you don't have when you're alone. And you need to explore both sides of that. Typically, it's in our relationships is where the rubber meets the road. That's where the real challenges are. That's where we get that's where we get upset. That's where we get angry. That's where we feel abused. That's where all this ego and fear comes out, is when we get into those deep personal relationships. And if you're alone and never talk to people, you don't have those opportunities to deal with those fears. You may have those fears and there's no opportunity, nothing that shows them up. So that whole part of your growth would be neglected. So you need both. You need to get out and be social and connect with people, even if you don't feel like it, even if you kind of have the personality of a hermit. You need to do it anyway. I'm a good example of that. Left alone, I probably wouldn't go out of my front door, but whenever I had to get groceries. But that's not a good way to grow. You're much better if you have to interact with lots of different kinds of people. So yes, you can grow on your own, but only within limitations.
Okay, Tom. Just adding a little bit to that, you're talking about processing things. Are we necessarily penalized for taking a really long time to process things?
No. This is not a time test. This growing up thing, you take all the time you need. Growing up has to be in your own way, done the way you need to do it. Your path is unique. It doesn't follow anybody else's path. Whatever at the time seems to be the right thing for you to do, well, you should do that. And then look back at it and decide whether that was a good thing to do. Are you really learning all the things you'd like to learn? And if you're not sure, then go try something else and see if that adds. Life is a exploration. Life is an experimental process. You just go try, you do, you interact, or you spend time by yourself. You do all these things and see what that gives to you. See what you learn from it. See what you can get out of that. And when you feel like you've gotten about as much as you can out of that, then do something different and see what you get out of that. And if you do something and you don't get anything good out of it, well, don't do that anymore. Go do something else. So it's an experimental thing. Go experiment. Just connect, work on it, and the path will unravel in front of your feet. You'll know whether you're making good progress or not. So it's no time test. It may take you, it may take you a decade, and somebody else might do the same thing in a month. That doesn't matter. So what? It's not that you're slow or that you're failing. You have to do it at your own speed and your own way. There's no other way for you to do it. So don't compare yourself to anybody else. Just do your own thing in your own way, but then always looking back and see what the consequences are, what the effect is, what have you learned from it, what value has it been, and then after you make that assessment, then either continue it or try doing something else, and then assess that. Can't just get in a rut and do the same thing all the time, because that will create limitations. There's value in diversity. The diversity of your experience is important. Just the same thing over and over again gets in a rut. You learn something from it, and then you're kind of stuck there.
Thank you, Tom. He also asked about sleep states. Are light sleep, deep sleep, and REM sleep 3 different data streams?
Deep sleep, generally you're not aware of any data stream. That's when you're completely unconscious. Light sleep, you're still aware of some things. In a light sleep, you're kind of aware of what's going on, the little noises around you, and that sort of thing. So you're still getting a data stream, just not a whole lot of data. A little sense data. Maybe if your eyes are shut, most of it's going to be hearing. Some of it may be tactile. But yeah, that would be a lighter. But they're not, it's not a different data stream. It's still the same data stream that sends data to your consciousness. Awareness is your consciousness. So it's not like it's some other data stream. It's just your same data stream with different kinds of data in it. A light sleep, it just gives you a little bit of information. A deep sleep, you probably don't get any data at all if you're really unconscious, unless you're doing things that are not in your intellect, not part of your awake consciousness. And then the REM sleep, where you're having dreams, well, then you get a data stream. Your conscious is downloading a data stream, and it deals with those dreams. So it's just one data stream producing different kinds of data at different times.
Okay, Tom. The next question does come from Vinicius, who has a follow-up question to the last question we did, or the question before that. Go ahead, Vinicius.
Okay, so it's about not interacting too much with people, as this other question raised up, because I spend my time usually pushing buttons on a computer. And is there any way, any tips that you could give to me that I could push those buttons in a more loving way?
Pushing the buttons in a more loving way. That's a tough one. You probably don't have much of an emotional experience pushing those buttons. They're probably just the buttons that need to be pushed. Unless, of course, you're playing some kind of video game and you're doing things like Grand Theft Auto or whatever, then you're probably not pushing your buttons in a loving way. You're probably pushing your buttons like a homicidal maniac or something else that's in the virtual reality. But if you're, typing an email, or if you're doing other kinds of things, that may have an emotional content to it that you have to do as you type. So your interaction with your computer isn't just a sterile intellectual connection. there should be some emotive, some kind of being level connection to what it is you're doing. Do you love what you're doing? Do you care about it? Is it thrilling? Is it, you're writing that, that letter that you've been putting off for a long time because it's really hard to write. What is it that you're doing? And the people you interact with that computer, I assume you're interacting with other characters, with other people in the computer. If you are interacting with human beings somewhere down the road, like sending an email, then the thoughts and the feelings you have toward them are important, and it'll show up in the way you express yourself. The words you choose to say, the words you choose not to say, that all carries a lot of information, and it has to do with who you are at the being level and your level of feeling and caring and connection. So yes, you can express yourself even behind a keyboard, and you can learn from those expressions instead of just seeing another human being as a robot and you're feeding them information. Start to think of that other person that you're writing that email to as somebody who has feelings and issues and problems and skills, and see them more as a whole person, not just somebody who's going to digest your information and act on it, but a whole person with all sorts of components to them. And if you do, then your messages that you send will work better. They will actually communicate better. You won't do it intellectually, but just the things you say and don't say will make a difference. Like, do you start out with "Hi, George," or do you not put anybody's name? You just write. See, that little personal touch of "Hi, George" means something to people, whether they kind of skip over it or not. It actually carries a little meaning. And if whether you sign your name and say, all right, Vinicus, is that right?
Vinicius.
Whether you sign your little Vinicius or whether you just leave it unsigned, that also says something. You see, all these things communicate something to who you're talking to. Whether you ask them about their day or, whether their sick wife ever got better or how's their baby doing, even though that's not your subject, it's just a business letter, that means something. So as you develop your caring and your interest in other people, it'll show just by the little bits and pieces. Not like you have to write a paragraph, write poetry to them or something, but just 2 or 3 words will make a difference and show that, you see them as something more than just another cog in a big machine that's just doing business. And that will make that business actually work a lot better, because they will start thinking of you more as a human being and less as a cog in a machine. And they will start telling you things that otherwise they just didn't bother to mention. And the whole thing will start to become more profitable for both of you. So yes, you can grow and put yourself and put your feelings and put your caring and all of that into those keys, into what it is you type and how you relate to people. So yes, you can put more love into the touch, not so much the touch on the keyboard, but what keys you decide to punch and which ones you don't.
Yeah, because I work with coding and reading papers and stuff. So, but does that also contribute, if I'm doing that better, does that also contribute in a way from my own quality? Even if it's like most of it for myself or for the people that are using the software, I don't know.
Yeah, whatever you do, you need to do it well. So if you do things very well, the best you can, you make it an art form. It's not just you putting out answers to questions or giving people information they need. Instead of seeing it that way, see it as a communication between people and human beings. See that whatever it is you do, even if it's something very menial. Let's say what somebody does is walk around along in parks with a stick with a nail sticking out the other end, picking up pieces of paper. And that's what they do. You know, that's their job. They walk around in the park and pick up trash paper that other people drop. Well, you can turn that into a meditation. You can see that as helping beautify the world, as helping reduce entropy, as, cleaning up the mess that others, being part of the solution. So you have to look at it that way. If you look at it as, oh man, I got the bottom of the barrel job, I don't get paid much, and all I do is pick up other people's trash, you see it negatively, then it affects you negatively and you're unhappy. If you see it positively, then you can grow from it. It's a meditation. It's a part of who you are. So whatever you do, if you're working in programming and computer things, and most of your talk is intellectual or whatever, or technical, that's okay, but do it well. Do it like it's an art form. Do it so that it couldn't be done any better. When somebody wants information, think about, is there something else that you could tell them that might be useful, so that you can produce the best quality output possible efficiently. And in that striving to do that, to have the best possible connection or output or help or whatever it is you're doing it and why you're doing it, that you do it as good as could possibly be done. And you do it with relish, with caring. So it doesn't matter so much what you do as it matters your attitude as you do it. If it's just something you do, like turning a crank, and you don't relate to it personally, and you don't make it an art form, then you get bored with it. It's just stale. And after a while, you just can hardly stand to go to work because you're just turning a dumb crank. It's not anything you really want to do. So you make turning that crank some kind of an art form. Like, I can turn that crank more precisely and better and faster than anybody else. Or even if there's nobody else, do it better than I did it last week. I'm going to get good at it. I'm going to be the best crank turner ever. And it'll be so precise and exactly the right time, and it'll make the whole assembly line move faster because I will be so good at this. Then you feel good about what you're doing. Even if you're turning a crank, you go home feeling like, wow, I did a good job today. I really turned that crank just the right time, the right way, the right speed. It was perfect. And you'll realize to turn that crank well takes practice. Everything takes practice. Picking up paper with the end of, the pointy stick takes practice. And you get good at it, and you get efficient with it, and be proud of what you do. So it doesn't matter what you're doing, but make it an art form. Make it something that you can feel like you're growing with it. You're learning. You're developing skills. You're part of the solution. You're an important part of some bigger thing, and you're helping make it all work. And you're going to do that to the best that you can. That sort of thing. If you have that attitude, then yes, you can grow spiritually and raise the quality of your consciousness in any situation.